Hey, all right. Welcome to another episode of Model Building Start to Finish. The saga continues with the SD40-2. This is John. I'm sitting here with Dan. And, we say this every time, but here we are again. It looks like it's coming together.
Yeah, it is. At this point, the engine's been painted. All the decals are on. I sprayed it with dull coat. And as you can see, I've got it sort of put together, but it's not really together. It doesn't actually run. And nothing's really, it's not really attached. So we're going to start the final assembly process now.
Oh,
and
that sounds promising.
Yeah. And so I like to do this with stuff that goes on the inside first and then stuff that goes on the outside later, mostly because the stuff that goes on the outside tends to be more fragile. And if you're handling the model, it can get broken. So,
like handrails and stuff like that.
Right, and antennas and all that little details on the roof and things. I find it better to put the stuff on the inside and then get the model kind of together on the inside, and then you can put the stuff on the outside, later. I took the number board glass from the Canon kit that's supplied with the cab and put it on some tape to hold them in place. And then I took some microscale decals from sheet 87-205, which is lightable number boards.
That's a microscale thing?
That's a microscale decal sheet, yeah. And I applied them upside down and backwards. And the reason for that is because I want the numbers to look like they're behind the glass, like on a real engine. So once the decals are on, then the last step is to use some black paint and just fill in the edges.
Oh, okay. Otherwise, it won't look right because you'll have light shining from
around
the outside.
Edges. Yeah, that would look bad. Okay, so the next step is to take some white number board decals from microscale sheet 87-904 and apply those on top of the numbers. And the reason I do this is because it looks a lot better to see white through the numbers than it does to just see clear.
It seems like you wouldn't see that unless the light was on.
Right. The numbers wouldn't show up unless the light was on if you don't do this also, because this way they'll look right whether the light's on or not.
Yeah. I remember seeing an example of that side by side, I think when we did the weathering and detailing diesel locomotives videos.
Right. So this is what the number boards look like when they're finished, and I flipped them over.
Yeah, I think it's worth emphasizing that you were actually working on the back side of what we're looking at.
Right.
So it was like, if I can even do this, they're so small. You're working on that side, right?
Right. And I did have to trim the excess decal from around the edges.
Yeah.
So, it would be the same size as the glazing. So getting these in is a little tricky, and I'm probably going to have to do it off camera. But basically, I take the number board and have to drop it in to the top of the cab here where it's supposed to fit, and then glue it. So once I get it positioned, I'll use a little brush with some liquid plastic cement to glue it.
Okay.
The reason for that is because any other type of glue, I would risk smearing it on the front of the number boards. I don't want to do that. Okay, so now the number boards are in, and I glued them in with some liquid styrene cement, like I said, and then I also reinforced it with some canopy glue.
Oh, okay.
Canopy glue is kind of like a white glue, and it dries clear. Just put it on the back, around the edges mostly, just to kind of fill in any little... There's a little tiny hairline gap at the edges.
Isn't that going to be a light leak?
Possibly. So that was one of the reasons I'm hoping that'll maybe help with that.
Yeah. Well, they look good, and I think it's the white backing that makes it look so much better, right, than if it hadn't been on there.
Right. So the next step is to install some lights. I've used some scrap O40 styrene to make a little mounting box for some LEDs to light up the number boards.
Right.
And this is just made, it's about 1.5 feet deep, scale feet, and about 6 scale feet wide. And this will glue to the roof of the cab.
Okay. So then the part that's facing me is where the number boards are? Is that
right?
It?
The cab front is like here and here. You know how it has a slight
it has that
angle?
Sort of triangle thing on the front of it.
Right. Yeah. So the number boards are up here. This will fit against the open part that's in the back.
Yeah.
And then the LEDs will mount where these little holes are.
Right.
Before I put the LEDs in, though, I need to paint this black so that there's no light leaks. So I've mounted 2 LEDs in the holes, and I've got it hooked up just so I can test it. I keep a little 9-volt battery around so I can test these things with a resistor on it.
Yeah, it looks nice. They're the same color, too, apparently.
Yeah, so now I'm going to put fairly large resistors on these so that they're not too bright, and also turn the brightness down.
I just said something by accident that we should probably talk about. They're the same color. Right?
Oh,
because these sometimes are different colors, aren't they?
yes, they are.
Yeah.
Sometimes, even though they all came out of the same package and that says warm white, sometimes they don't exactly match. So it's a good idea to try to match them if you're going to use them in pairs for any reason.
Yeah, like ditch lights, right? Because you don't want one light looking different from the other.
Right.
Although I suppose that could happen in prototype, but I don't think I've ever seen that.
It could, but it looks weird.
Yeah, it looks weird on a model for sure.
Yeah.
So, and I noticed you painted it black too, like you said you were going to.
Right.
So.
I painted the inside black, and I'll probably paint the outside black too once I glue it in.
Right.
Just as a precaution.
Sounds like a good idea.
So I just noticed while looking at photos that the window gaskets and number board gaskets on this particular engine should be black. And it really would have been better to do that before I put the glass in the number boards. But since I didn't, I'm going to have to do it now. And I'm going to use a colored pencil to do this because I can control the application pretty well with the pencil.
Uh-huh.
So I'm going to give the lights one more test before I call it done, just to make sure nothing came loose.
Oh, look at that. That's nice.
Yeah. So,
they look nice and even.
Yeah, which is what I want. They should be pretty much the same. And having them set back a little, I think, helps them be more diffused looking.
Yeah.
Because you don't want the LEDs behind the number boards to be super bright.
This seems like a good time to check for light leaks too, right?
Right. Yeah, that would be good. I actually went in on the inside and I painted the outside of the box black also, now that it's glued in there.
So to further guard against light leaks.
Right. And I don't know if we showed it, but before I glued the box in, I also painted the roof on the inside black.
We didn't show that. Maybe let's turn it over and take a look at that.
Okay. So this is the box right here.
Yep.
And
that's
then
the top of the cab, right?
Right. And I painted that black, and the roof of the cab is actually painted black under the box too, because I painted it before I put the box in.
Yeah, that's a good idea because black paint is more
opaque.
Yeah.
Yeah. Since I have an extra function available, I'm using a 6-function decoder in this thing.
Uh-huh.
And we've got, 2 headlights, 2 ditch lights, and the number boards, that's 5. So there's one left over. I thought it might be fun to do a cab light.
Oh, that's not something you usually do, is it?
Not usually, but I thought since there's the function available, might as well use it for something.
Yeah.
So I took another of these surface mount LEDs and just drilled a couple of holes in a little piece of scrap plastic.
Uh-huh.
And I'm just going to glue this into the cab roof.
Oh, well, that'll be neat.
Yeah. Now I glued the cab light in there.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
So are you going to paint that black too for any reason? Or is there any reason to paint it black?
Probably not strictly necessary, but I might do it anyway.
Yeah, maybe later, right? Because it might be more visible if it's not.
Yeah, it's way up there, so unless you're really looking up at the model from below, you would never see it.
Yeah. So when it's going over that huge bridge you don't have on your layout?
Yeah.
6 feet up or 8 feet up?
Yeah, it would take an angle like that to really even have a chance of seeing it.
Yeah, the 10-foot trestle.
Yeah. All right, so this is the back wall of the Canon cab interior kit.
It has holes in it.
Right. If you've been following the series and saw the chapter where I built this, you'll remember that I drilled some holes in there.
Oh, okay. I thought you drilled them when it was built the first time, then you just painted it later, right?
Right. Anyway, these holes are for wires, and now the time has come to actually put them to use. So what I need to do is to thread those wires for the cab light and for the number boards through these 2 holes in the top.
Okay.
As I put this in.
Oh, that'll be fun. I guess we won't be doing that on camera.
Probably not.
Should I leave the camera running so that the audience can hear the cussing?
Yeah, probably not. All right, so I have the back wall of the cab interior mounted, and I got the wires routed through it.
Right.
So the Canon cab windows come with tape over them, and I guess this is so if you wanted to, you could put them in before you painted the model because they'd be pre-masked. The only problem with that is that the window the window openings, I should say, overlap the window glazing. So I don't know how you'd get the tape off.
Yeah, that seems a little strange. Maybe it's on there just to protect it whenever it ships or something.
Maybe. Anyway, usually I get, corner of it started with my fingernail and then just peel it off. So I just wanted to point out that the Canon windows come in 3 different sizes. There's 4 of these, and these go in the front and on the parts of the cab that don't have doors.
Okay.
This is basically the same size, but it has a little notch. Those go on the doors.
Okay.
And then this other one is for the side windows.
So
That's
this
kind
comes,
of
it comes with directions, right?
It does, yeah.
Oh, okay.
But this one is a little not quite as tall, So anyway, just wanted to show those. If you watch the episode where I assembled the cab window frames, I glued them together in pairs.
Yes.
And I've now installed the glass. And the reason I did it this way is because if you want the windows in the closed position, it's a lot easier to put in one thing than to try to put in two things and get them all lined up and centered.
Uh-huh.
So much easier when you just have one thing to put in.
For sure.
Okay, so even though I'm waiting for most of the exterior details till later, I did go ahead and put on the windshield wipers.
And why is that?
Because it's possible when putting the windshield wipers on to dislodge one of the cab windows.
Oh, because you're pushing on it.
Right. And it's better to do that while you still have access to the cab and can fix it if that happens.
Oh, that would be awful.
Yeah.
If it fell in and you couldn't get to it, you'd have to take it all apart, huh?
Right. Plus that center wiper is important to put on before you put the nose on. Otherwise, it's almost impossible to get in there.
Ew.
So that's why I went ahead and did it. So the outer wipers are Detail Associates Part 2314.
Yeah.
And the inner one is Part 2316.
That's also the same company?
Same company. Another exterior detail that I'm going to install now, since it's going to be hard to do later, is the screwy nose door with the funny paint job.
Yeah, what do you mean screwy and all that?
Well,
hey, there's no stripe.
Right, that's what I mean. Normally the stripe would continue and you wouldn't have this blue thing down here. But I
that's
looked
how it
at,
is in the pictures?
That's
for
how
real?
it is in the pictures. I think what it is there's another door like this on the other side of the engine, and they probably took this door off a different locomotive when they were doing a repair.
Yeah. Well, whatever, but that's prototype specificity, right?
It is, yeah. So there's two little indentations in the back of the door, and there's two little pins.
Oh, there it is.
So those fit together, and since this is already painted, I'll just use CA for this.
Did you just put a dab on each pin or
just a little dab in the back? It doesn't take very much. Don't want to put so much that it squeezes out.
Oh, that would suck. You spent all that time painting this so nicely and then to have to... Yeah, look at that.
Yeah.
That just looks weird. I mean...
It does look weird, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, I would almost be tempted to do it as an sort of an as-built or as-delivered scheme because that looks... But again, I mean, that gives it character, right?
Yeah. So at this point, there's really no reason for the nose to continue to be a separate piece.
Oh, are you going to actually assemble the nose for real?
Yeah. That's where I was going with all of this. So we've got the wipers on, got the door on. Now I can put this on. And you just want to make sure that it's nice and tight and seated. And if you look at the cab from the front, make sure that it's straight across, that it's not leaning. You should just... Everything should work. This looks like it's pretty good. So I'm going to turn it over and use some liquid styrene cement to glue it.
Now, a quick question before you do that, because I'm going to turn the camera off before you turn it over to do that. And that is, I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it for the benefit of the audience. What if you look at it and it's not flush and it's not straight and it's not fitting properly?
Then you have to fiddle with it until it does.
Right, with sandpaper or files or whatever.
Usually with Canon parts, you won't have to do that. And that's really something that you want to test for before you paint it.
Oh, right. Yeah, because you want to test, you want to do that filing or sanding before it's painted, right?
Right. So at this point, everything should go together the way it's supposed to.
Okay.
So one thing you sometimes have to do is apply a little pressure right here because there sometimes is a tiny gap.
So you're pushing toward the front of the engine when you do that?
Pushing the nose and the front of the cab together.
And that's because otherwise, it won't
There was just a little
tiny...
very tiny gap there. Another little detail I just added, because it would be hard to do later, is the little post that goes from the top of the nose up into the bottom of the number board area. Just
in front of the windshield there.
Right.
You can barely see that, but there it is.
These appear on a lot of Santa Fe engines. I'm not really sure what the purpose is. And a lot of times they're painted yellow, but on this particular engine it was painted blue. And I don't know if you've watched the series from the beginning or past episodes, you may have noticed that I did drill a hole in the nose for this thing.
Yeah, I remember when you were doing the nose, you mentioned it.
Yeah, so finally put the hole to use. So now I got the front wall of the cab interior kit glued in.
Yep.
And now it's time to add the rest of the cab interior. When putting the cab interior together in pieces like this, I've found that a lot of times these parts with the seats end up being too long to fit between the front piece and the back piece that we already glued in.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm not sure why that is. I think this actually, that back piece is designed to fit over this, but that never actually works or never seems to. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my knife and just trim off a little bit off the back here.
And now, are you measuring or are you just
estimating? I'm just eyeballing it.
Okay.
Okay, so I've installed the fireman's side of the cab interior, and now I'll do the engineer's side. And it's a little tricky, but basically you have to kind of get it in there and then push it sideways, and it's going to want to drop in. So I like to use something with a hook on it, like these sprung tweezers, and you can kind of grab the thing and pull it back down until it's flush.
So you're kind of using those sprung things to tuck it into the corner, sort of?
Right. And then once it's down, I can glue it with some liquid styrene cement. I like to make my headlight lenses out of 030 fiber optic strand. And what I've done is I've taken a piece of aluminum tubing and slipped it over the strand. So I leave about, I don't know.
What is that, a millimeter?
Yeah, something like that. Just a little bit. And then I take a lighter and I hold it close to the flame and it flares the end.
Yep. Seen this many times.
Yeah. So need to make 6 of those. And sometimes if the thing doesn't turn out the right size or if it's crooked or something, you may have to do it again. Sometimes it takes a few tries to get good ones.
And is it 6 because you're doing 2 headlights on either end plus the ditch lights?
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
So then what I do is I take a little silver paint and I paint the back of the lens because this will make it look kind of like a reflector.
Yeah. Doesn't that also help with light leaking?
It will. Although there typically isn't too much light leaking from fiber optics. Okay, so before I install the fiber optics, I should probably put in the nose grabs. And I'm also going to put the grab irons on the rear of the unit because I like to glue them from the inside. And if I put too much more on the inside, it's going to be really hard to get to them.
Oh, right, because if you put them on the outside, you might get glue blobs on the nice paint you just did.
Right, I don't want to do that. So one way to make sure that the grab irons are all at the same distance from the shell is to use a little 040 styrene strip as a spacer when gluing them in.
Oh, right.
And then once the glue dries, you can just pull that out. So I installed the same type of grab iron on the rear end, and these are Tichy Part 3015.
Yeah, on the back, it's even more evident how using that spacer thing would be helpful because those are all very close to each other.
Yeah, especially the side with the ladder.
Yeah,
you really want those to be all the same.
Right, looking at the left side in the video here, and it is very obvious that you would have to space those, or else it would look goofy.
Yeah, it would. So this is what it looks like after the lenses are seated in the headlight opening, and the reason why I painted them silver is because it makes the part around the edge of the headlight look like a reflector.
Yeah, it looks like real headlights.
Yeah, when I like them to look real when they're on and off, so that's why I do it this way. So for the headlight and backup light, I'm using 3mm warm white LEDs, and I've already soldered some wires to this and put some heat shrink tubing around them to keep them insulated.
Mm-hmm.
And the blue wire goes to the positive,
okay,
and the white wire, in this case, since it's the headlight, goes to the negative. And for the backup light, I'd use a yellow wire because that's the standard color coding. Once I have the lead soldered to the LED, I take a larger piece of heat shrink tubing and slip it over the whole thing.
Oh, I remember this.
Yeah.
I remember this from the weathering and detailing video where you showed this whole process.
Right. This accomplishes 2 things. 1, it's a light barrier, and 2, it acts as a holder for the fiber optic strands. And I'll go ahead and use my soldering iron to heat shrink the back of it just to make sure there's even less chance of any light leaking out that way.
Right. So those 2 fiber optic leads that are going to come from the headlights, they'll both be fed by the same LED.
Right.
And they're going to stick inside that little cylinder, right?
Right. I've run the wires for the headlight through the cab, through those holes that I drilled back when I built the cab pieces.
I remember that.
Yeah. And I also cut a piece of heat shrink tubing in here for the part that runs actually through the cab and put the wires through that. And the reason for that is because this is black and it's less likely to show if you see something through the window, as opposed to a blue and white wire, which might be a little more noticeable. And because this opening up here is fairly large, I've cut a smaller piece of heat shrink tubing. I'm going to put it inside. That'll concentrate the fiber optic strands a little more tightly.
Right into one
LED.
place.
Right. And then once this is done, I can pull it down and get it kind of seated behind the headlight. I took 2 of the fiber optic strands that I made earlier with the lenses, and I cut them to about 1 inch long. And I can push these through now and feed them into the heat shrink tubing that's inside the nose.
Oh, the little black cylinder.
Yeah. So this is what it looks like when everything's put together. I should mention that none of this is glued or anything, and the reason for that is because it'll make it easier to remove if I ever have to replace the LED for some reason.
Could happen, huh?
Yeah. It works just fine to do it this way, especially in a location like this that isn't going to get disturbed.
Yeah.
So it should be okay just like this. I always like to test the lights as I put them in. So this is with it off, and then I can hook it up to my battery test thing.
Oh, that's nice.
So now I can start installing the ditch lights. So I'm going to start threading the wires through the holes that I drilled when I built this thing originally.
And the castings go into those holes, don't they?
Yeah, there's a little nub on the bottom of the casting that fits inside the holes there. So first they have to go through the deck.
Oh, and there's the casting I was just thinking about.
Right. I've got to, of course, turn it. And I'll have to glue it in and seat it, but there.
Yeah, you can fine tune it once you have everything
Right.
through, right?
And then if you remember, there's another hole that goes into the model underneath the anti-climber. And the wires have to go through there too. All right, so it took a little doing, but I managed to fish the wires through all the
I'm
holes.
only laughing because I heard all the frustration coming from the other side of the table.
Anyway, I did actually end up drilling 2 new holes.
Mm-hmm.
Here and here. So the wires come through the pilot and then up into the nose and then through this same place where the headlight wires go through.
Right.
And then back into the rest of the shell back here.
Now that's all going to be concealed when you put the model back together, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually, I put some blue tape on the ditch light wires so that I have them paired so that I know that, this is one light and this is the other light.
Right.
Okay. So I want to move on to the back of the locomotive. But before I start putting stuff in there, I want to install the fans because if I don't do it now, it'll be harder to do it later.
Oh, right. Because they're in there.
Right. So the Canon fans, there's the blade assembly, and then there's the hub, and then there's a bottom piece. So these just need to be put together.
Will you just snap them or do you have to glue it?
A lot of times it fits tight enough you don't really need to glue it. You can if you want to. And this bottom piece goes on, and this just kind of sandwiches in the middle. So this fan was actually slightly loose. So I used a little dab of liquid styrene cement on the bottom where this little pin comes through, and that should hold it. The next step with these is I have to twist each blade.
Nothing's ever easy. How many blades are there? Like 10?
Something, but you just grip them with a pair of needle nose pliers and turn them just slightly.
Right. And I bet you should only do that once, huh?
Right, because it's very fragile, so you don't want to bend it again because it may just snap it off. So these are the assembled Canon fans for the dynamic brakes, and these are the Detail Associates fans for the radiator. And I've sprayed them all with some Dull Coat. And since this will also be impossible to do once they're installed, I'm going to go ahead and weather them a little bit.
Okay.
So I've got some black weathering powder on my brush. Just going to...
Oh, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, well,
Are you trying to make them pitch black? I mean, you might as well spray paint them.
no, not that much is going to stick.
No,
really.
I know. I'm just kidding. I've seen this process before, so I know exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
I kind of forgot about this, but now that you mentioned it, yeah, because you can't get under the grills once you put this stuff on.
Exactly.
And even if you want to, if you tried to put powders inside those fan, it would go through to the motor and stuff. You don't want to get that inside your locomotive.
Right. The Canon fans install from the top. And if you notice, I have my finger under the hub of the mounting area. That's because these little pieces that hold that center are very fragile.
Oh, yeah. You want to support those, huh?
Right. You don't want to push the fan down on here without supporting it from the opposite side. Otherwise, they'll break.
Sounds like you have some experience with that.
Yeah, I do. Trust me. So I'm just going to use a little drop of CA glue. And
you learned from experience. Don't do the same thing.
Right. And then I'll take this fan and I can kind of work it in there.
You know, Dan, you haven't heard me say this in a long time, but I'm going to say it. It would be really neat if someone could figure out a way to make the fans turn.
Yeah.
On an HO scale model like this.
Okay.
It would look neat, wouldn't it?
It would. Okay, so the other fans install from the bottom, and I've already put in one, this one here, and it's held in place with a little tiny plastic ring that they give you.
Oh, boy.
So I've already glued that in. The next fan doesn't have the ring on it yet, and the last one is empty because the fan fits on the little spindle in the middle.
So one's fully installed, one's partially installed, and one's not installed at all?
Right.
Oh, okay.
I wanted, because it's impossible for me to show this on camera because I got to get my big fingers in here and do it. So I just thought I'd show the steps this way. Now that I have the fans installed, I can start building my sound enclosure. Now, experience with doing lots of sound decoder installs has taught me that generally the larger the enclosure, the better the sound.
Right? It's kind of like with speakers in general, right?
Right. Because and you could use a commercial enclosure, but a lot of those aren't much bigger than the speaker itself.
Uh-huh.
And I've found that the sound quality is not always the best. So what I'm doing here, I usually like to put them in the back. And what I want to do is build an enclosure that occupies the area under the radiator fans.
Right.
And I'm going to stop it right before the flywheel so that there's no chance that it'll come down. Because remember, it's going to have some vertical depth.
Yeah.
Right. So that means it'll come out to about here somewhere.
That's a big enclosure.
Yeah. It's actually bigger than the speaker I'm using, but that's okay. That'll be a good thing. So this is a piece of 040 styrene that I've cut to approximately 5 scale feet wide to fit inside the hood.
Did you measure that too?
I did. And then I ended up having to sand it down a little bit because it was just a little tight. And I also cut it to match the contour of the...
Oh, right in the back. I can see where that is. It's pointed like that.
So this is actually the bottom. And on the top, this is the side that'll fit the fans. I added a couple of 040 by 040 plastic rails on either side. That's just to space it a little bit because there's some of those lift rings and things that we put in stick down a little bit.
Right.
So if I tried to put it all the way down, it wouldn't really fit. And all I'm going to do now is I'm going to paint this side black so that there's no chance that the white plastic will show through the fan openings. So this is the part after I painted it, and this is a really lousy paint job. But
this was a brush paint, huh?
It was a brush paint with some old paint that's kind of thick and not very good. But you know what? You're not going to see this anyway.
Yeah. It's not functional and it's not exposed, so who cares?
Right. So this piece will fit right in there like that.
And that's just one side of it, right? So you have to build up some walls around it.
Now I know some people, and I've even tried it myself, to point the speaker up and make it
come out of the fans, huh?
Come out of the fans. But I found that the sound quality is actually better when the speaker points down toward the wheels.
Okay.
So that's what I'm doing. Okay, the next thing is to build the front of the enclosure. And I've used another piece of 040 styrene. It's about 5 scale feet wide and about 3.5 deep. And I've determined that that's a safe depth that'll still clear the mechanism.
I noticed it has holes in it.
It does. There's two holes, two sets of holes. One set is for the wires for the speaker, and the other set is for the fiber optics for the rear light.
Oh, okay.
So, and this will just go right here.
Oh, this is a liquid styrene cement job, huh?
Yeah. Once I can get it in, there we go. So we'll sit right there, and I'll have to glue it. I cut some strips of plastic. It happens to be 080 by 156, but it could really be any similar size. But I've cut them all to 2-foot lengths, and these are just supports.
Okay, so 2 scale feet.
2 scale feet,
And
yes.
that's to give it enough space behind the magnet or whatever?
Right, this is to support the speaker. So this is my speaker.
And what is it?
And it'll fit in there like that. This is a 4 ohm, 16 millimeter by 35 millimeter speaker. A Loc Sound Select, which is what I'm going to use in this thing, can handle anywhere between a 4 and 16 ohm load, but the best sound quality comes with a 4 ohm load.
Okay.
So I'm using a 4 ohm speaker. So now I can go ahead and install the fiber optics for the rear headlight.
Yes.
So I'll start by feeding it through the headlight casting. And then I've run it through one of those sets of holes that I drilled in the front part of the enclosure, and I can just push it all the way through.
So you just run both fiber optics the same way?
Right. Before I proceed, I've taken some silicone RTV rubber and spread it around anywhere that I think there might be an air leak.
Is this to seal the speaker in the enclosure?
Right. This is to seal the top of the enclosure, basically, that we've built. And then I'll put some more on after the rest of the enclosure's built.
Oh, I see, because the speaker's not in yet.
The speaker's not in yet.
Right. Sorry, I didn't see that.
This has to be done before the speaker goes in because the speaker's going to block access to this. So I've used a few little blobs of RTV, and that'll be to hold the speaker in place. And I'll just set it down here.
So you put the RTV on the speaker itself?
No, I put it on the little pillars that hold it up.
Oh, okay.
And then I'll finish pulling the wires through.
I'm noticing that this shape right there looks a lot like that shape right there.
Right, because right now there's a big air gap behind the speaker, so it needs to be plugged.
Yeah,
and that's what this little piece of styrene is for.
That would sound awful, wouldn't it, if you just left it open?
It would be worthless. So this is just another piece of 040 styrene that I've cut to size, and I'll glue that in.
So you're going to just glue that to the pillars,
I'll
basically?
glue it in, and then I'm going to put more RTV around the whole thing.
Oh, to finish sealing. Right, because the whole thing with this, maybe we should mention that when you're making an enclosure like this, you're wanting to seal it so that the air can't escape. Otherwise, you'll get like rattly sounds, right?
Or it just won't be as
bass.
effective. Yeah. The whole thing with the speaker enclosure is you want the air on one side to be isolated from the air on the other side.
Right. And that creates better bass, better dynamic range, basically. Right. Yeah. Everything's really sealed in there.
Yeah. So now the enclosure's done, and this is probably a good place to stop for now, and we can pick it up next time with the decoder installation.
Okay. Well, I know that's good news because that's going to be what makes the thing go.
Right.
Getting close, Dan.
Getting close.
All right. Well, I guess we'll catch everybody on our next episode. We'll see you then.
All right.